Welcome to WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, Chief Operating Officer of the WBC. Today, we are here to talk about our latest report, Women in the C-Suite, Pathways to Success. WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 70 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, a diverse board of directors, and advisory and leaders councils include more than 37% people of color. Please check the chat for our 9 action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change, and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. Today, we want to talk about the release of our new white paper, Women in the C-Suite, Pathways to Success, which just went live today. This white paper aims to give all women aspiring to corporate leadership a first-hand look at the trailblazing paths of 20 leading women executives who have made it to the C-Suite. These leaders share their career tips and advice and how to build a pathway to the C-Suite. So we are joined today by Tacy Byam, Chief Executive Officer of Development Dimensions International, DDI, and Rosina Recchiopi, President and CEO of Women Unlimited, both of whom are WBC partners and champions in the WBC and co-authors of this white paper. Welcome, Tacy, and welcome, Rosina.
So happy to be here.
Thanks, Gwen.
Wonderful to have you here. So let's start about why this report is important. How did we put it together, and how did your objectives drive how you built this report?
Well, you know, we saw and we know there's a lot of publications out there that inform our thinking about how women can ascend to the C-suite. But we wanted to take a really different approach, a somewhat unprecedented approach, and really hear the personal stories of these women and understand what did they do early in their career that led them to pathways to the highest levels into the C-suite. And you know, for so many years, we all have understood or have been told that the pathway to the C-suite requires P&L responsibility. And we wanted to get beyond that, beyond the P&L and the business impact. What are the more subtle ways, the subtle decisions that these women took that allowed them to advance and achieve that C-level role? And we really wanted to look at beyond the traditional roles. What were other ways? So it's a very diverse group of women in their functions and experiences that make this report so exciting.
The other thing I'll point out is that we specifically tailored this report for early career women, also for HR professionals to get insight, and for senior level women inside of organizations to think about what they can do to continue the momentum that they had and the wind behind their own wings as they rose up within the C-suite. So what we did was collaborate with, Rosina and I chaired the action initiative for the WBC called Women in the Pipeline. And we also collaborated with Women in the C-Suite, and together we brought real life examples from these 20 women. And to give you a sampling of where they sit right now, they're from AT&T, Prudential Financial, Kroger, PPG, Panasonic, household names that you would know, along with many other leading organizations. And what they did was share their stories and their vital strategies that they saw helped them with growth and advancement in their careers. And we came down to 4 different pathways. So within the report, it's broken into 4 key areas. And the first is about forging meaningful relationships. We're going to dig into a little bit on that, Gwen. Integrating work and the rest of your life, because there is no one right answer. The other is broadening your value to the company. And so that's beyond the P&L that we were talking about, and we'll dig into that for you. And then a theme of risk taking. And for each of those, we took the stories, came up with the key themes, and then also did a focus, a close-up on one of the women, one of the corporate leaders who talked about their pathway, that the incredible stories that are there. And then we have advice for how you can personalize your own pathway within there, because there is no one right answer. But these are the key themes that came up across the board. So together, I think it's a wonderful way for people to think about what's different, what's new, and alternative ways to reach the C-suite.
I love that. And I want to dive a little bit, as you said, into kind of, are the pathways different? Are the roles new, right? And we're all coming out of this sort of post-COVID world. Everyone's going different ways of working, different roles. So, it's not one pathway, correct? I want to hear a little bit more from you both about what's new with the pathways and the roles.
So yeah, you're right, Gwen. I mean, there isn't one pathway. There isn't the, traditional take a P&L role and you will, move forward. As we've said before, the power of this report is in the subtle differences in what the women have done early on in their career that led them to the experiences, broadening their understanding of the business. Their managers, when we talk about relationships, the key role that their managers and sponsors played in influencing how they took assignments, how they looked at roles in a different way. There's one piece that Carolyn Feeney talks about where she was given an opportunity and she said, I have small children. I can't possibly do this role. And her sponsor said, who said that I want you to do this role the same way as it's always been done? I want you to do it your way. And so it was a combination of leaders pushing these women outside their comfort zone and providing that support for them to craft their own way of delivering impact that has been so powerful across all these stories in this report.
That's fantastic. And it's so interesting to think about as we're all kind of looking at these ways you can do it differently. Tacey, you mentioned a word earlier, which I want to come back to, vital suggestions. Talk about what are some of these vital suggestions in the report.
Yeah, while there was many different stories and pathways, there were common themes, and there were key messages that all of the interviewees that we touched upon said, "Ooh, if I had one thing to pay it forward and to tell somebody about, it would be these themes." And so the vital suggestions that came out are really two: stay flexible and be authentic. So to stay flexible, that means be agile. There is advice from women in the C-suite who said you need to think in the here and now. You also need to think about the next steps for your future. So you need to plan, but at the same time, be agile and don't always just stick to your way of always doing things in the past, because if you do that, you're going to miss opportunities that are sitting there right in front of you. So it's that delicate balance between planning but flexibility that's there. But that was one of the themes. The second suggestion is be authentic. Avoid someone else's path, because each of everybody, no matter where you are at any position, has your own brain, your own passion, and your own mission. And the way someone else ascended to the top is going to be different for you. Yet there's lessons to be learned in how they did it. And so those are the two things: stay flexible and be authentic. Rosino, any suggestions you want to add?
I just want to add, there was this wonderful example by the woman from Kroger who started the first, and I did not know this, that she started the first in-store florist in a grocery store. Never was done before, never had that idea even occurred to anyone, and she pursued it. She did the supply chain, all of the aspects of it. So what's interesting is I think that's an example reminiscent of many of the stories where these women understood they wanted to enhance the value of their business. They took a unique idea, took a risk, and really did the groundwork to create this new opportunity for the organization. And so that being authentic and being flexible were so critical in this story, right? To create
Mhm.
great impact to success.
So that leads us great into our next topic, which is we talked about the white paper identified, 4 key areas that are critical to building the pathway. So one of those is forging meaningful relationships. I'd love to hear each of you talk about exactly what this means and what can both individuals, organizations, and companies do to build those relationships and networks.
So there were a lot of memorable quotes in this area. And one of the quotes was, avoid an echo chamber because that is the absolute worst kind of network. And of course, that means that you're stuck in an echo chamber with like-minded people and you're not getting a gaggle of diversity who are helping you think through things differently and helping create different networks for you. And so it's why Ann Chow, who's retired as the CEO of AT&T Business, said, your number one key to success is the people you surround yourself with. So that's the value of forging these meaningful networks. Now, we know that networks need to be modified as your position and your goals change, which is why one of the simple things that I advocate for when I'm speaking on women advancing in their careers is do a triad network where you've got one person above you and one person below you. And so it's very interesting because you can work on each other's goals. You're learning about different parts of the business. You're learning about different levels. If you're above someone, you're also learning about what the challenges are there. And it's very reciprocal and meaningful to all involved. But you have to do a reset as your goals change and as your career path change. And it is interesting because we have informal networks that you create, but then there's formal mentoring that is oftentimes given and structured. That's a part of what organizations do. And at DDI, we do a global leadership forecast, and our pulse check of 15,000 leaders around the world found that men were 22% more likely to be assigned a formal mentor. So the point here is if you're not getting it from your company, you need to be intentional. You need to look for mentors everywhere you go. And Gwen, to your question about what do individuals need to do and what do organizations need to do, I just want to point out that the back of the white paper has a call to action for both women who are aspiring to the C-suite and for corporate leaders who are supporting the talented women inside. And there's a checklist of things that you should stop and pause and reflect on what your organization is doing in each of the 4 areas.
That's great. I would also add, we can't overlook the importance of the manager's role in helping women, especially in that early career stage, expand beyond their comfort zone, take risks. There are multiple stories in the white paper around leaders who saw potential in these women and said, I know your background is engineering, but I want you to be in this sales role for a while to help them understand that customer face-to-face interaction and how that informs their thinking. I love that echo chamber comment because so often we surround ourselves with people that we are comfortable with, that don't challenge our thinking. And we know as business leaders, we need to be around people that challenge our assumptions, help us understand our business and ourselves more broadly. All of the women that we talked to also talked about the importance of them developing others, right? So it isn't just about building relationships that are good for me. It's also how am I creating followership? How am I learning, as Tacey was pointing out, people that are in different positions so that I can better understand their challenges, their issues. More importantly, I can provide some solutions for them. So I think organizations really need to think about how do we help managers understand what their true role is in guiding and developing others, removing obstacles, help support and challenge their thinking so that they can work beyond their self limitations that they may be seeing for themselves.
I love it. I'm going to build on that because Rosina, you talked a little bit earlier about, a couple points. So we have, the Women in the Pipeline Action Initiative in this, we call it the Women in the C-Suite and Executive Leadership with P&L Responsibility, because that has been traditional. And so the question is, you talk about sort of creating value. So how big a role does P&L play? And what did we learn through some of these interviews about how you create that or how you own that P&L responsibility?
I think one of the themes, and I'd love to hear Stacey's comments on this too, is that each of the women gained insight and understanding of how they, in the role that they had throughout their career, created value, whether they were in a direct line of business role or in a supporting role. They understood in what I do today and in the actions I take, how does it add value to the business? And they could articulate that. And they also had relationships that helped them think more broadly about, and then what would be next after this, right? So now that I have this body of knowledge, I've worked in sales, I've worked in operations, what's next so that I can have a fuller understanding of the business and how I create impact?
And I'll add to that a number of the people that we talked to, and one I can think of was chemical engineering, and then our Kroger story with the flowers. Both of them talk about being intrapreneurs inside of their organization, and so looking for that opportunity that's given to them because of the networks that they have, the value that they have displayed, that is at that sweet spot of helping them accelerate their own role, play into what they have as a leader, as well as expand their understanding of the business. And so expanding understanding of the business is the key to me, more than simply having P&L responsibility.
I love that. So we're going to end this with kind of that last question that we always do. We call it impact, right? And as you pointed out, Stacey, at the end of the report, there's a list of things to do. But what are the key things companies and organizations can do to build a culture that recruits, retains, and advances women all the way up to these senior leadership roles?
Well, Gwen, I have to tell you, Rosina and I love this question because this is the hard work that we dedicate ourselves and our organizations to doing every single day. So we are consulting with talent management, L&D, D&I practitioners inside of Fortune 500 companies, mid-sized companies, nonprofits. And if you want to dig further into DDI, my company, or Women Unlimited, where Rosina is CEO, please look us up and we'll be happy to talk more. But the key point that nobody would disagree with is this is not a women's issue. This is a system issue. We need to fix the system. We need to go beyond the lip service of the ideals of equity because we do not have 257 years to wait for this. And so what that means is accountability. And to do that, we need to drive objectivity into the decision making, the decision on who you promote, who you're hiring into organizations, who you're putting into the acceleration pool to move up into the C-suite. Do that in a way that is fair and equitable and data-based and is removing any unconscious bias. There's also, through that process, the ways you create and spot hidden talent inside of your organization that you weren't even aware of, because that talent is what's going to help you break through and break out of the echo chamber in order to help the organization achieve its goals. The other thing that Rosina and I would talk about is you need to really teach inclusive leadership. And inclusive leadership is in every single conversation that leaders have every day. Inclusive leadership comes up in who you delegate to, how you are managing and giving voice to people inside of meetings. How are you holding people accountable for, and if there are any microaggressions, and creating micro affirmations. And the other thing is to be aware of, you brought up, Gwen, we're in a whole new world of work. And the concept that I've been talking a lot at the office about is the Zoom ceiling. because we've elected, as many organizations have, which is to be hybrid. So half of our workforce is going into the office frequently and half is staying home. And the Zoom ceiling is for those people who are not getting those face-to-face in order to create those meaningful relationships of the past. And so it's a watch out, because that should not be anything that holds women back. They're most of the people who've chosen to stay at home proportionally. So it's a watch out for managers to think about when I delegate, who I have conversations with, that I need to be equitable within my conversations in the workplace and also on Zoom. And the other one is, of course, invest in women in their careers. We've got to create new pathways for them and make sure we're doing that and measuring that we're doing that in an equitable way across the organization and around the world. Rosina, do you have anything to add?
My God, Tacey, you said it so beautifully. I think the thing that I would add is to really be mindful about how you look at potential. I do think that sometimes we use a male model of what potential looks like. And so women can spend the early part of their career doing the work, thinking that that will give them the path forward, and then stall at a certain point because they're not understanding the other elements that are important in order to navigate an organization to their success. So make sure that you're being mindful of the metrics and the formulas that you're using to identify potential, especially early, to encourage women to look at the opportunities that are in front of them in the organization and to not be beholden to past success. Like, you do not have to do a job the way that your male leader did it. You can do it your own way. We have stories in this white paper that highlight women who found a path forward in their own unique way, creating sizable impact to their organization in a way that allowed them to manage their life in a holistic way.
I love that. There's one thing we have to take away is do it your way and seize the opportunities, right? Opportunities, risk, there's new way. Thank you, Tacey. Thank you, Rosina, as always, for your insights today and for all of your hard work, both on this paper and all the work you do every day in your organizations and with Women Business Collaborative in order to keep us moving towards progress for equity in business. And that's all we have time for. So we invite you to wbcollaborative.org to learn more about WBC's initiatives to increase women in the C-suite boardroom, to address the underrepresentation of women and access to capital and other industries, and to advance a pipeline of women leaders to reach gender and pay parity, diversity, equity, and inclusion to the business landscape. So join us at our WBC Annual Action for Impact Summit, which is September 21st and 22nd, where we will talk more about this, and we will actually speak with 6 women C-suite leaders with Tacey about all of these issues. And join us next Thursday to talk with Lisa Edwards, the COO of Diligent, to talk about corporate purpose. Keep up to date on our next guest, our progress, the movement for gender parity in business, and the latest issues by following us on social media at WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and have a wonderful Thursday.